how people should prepare if they're starting a career now. What kind of opportunities do you see that are AI proof?
I love this quote. There is this guy who is called Sergey Nazarov, is the person behind Chainlink, the co-founder of Chainlink. And he said once in a podcast, if he wants to send a message to the youth, he say, okay, if you're really smart, you're going to make it anyways. If you're not, you're screwed anyways. And the thing is, it doesn't matter. I mean, we have various things that could happen in life. You have to be open to the sense, okay, you'll have lots of technology. For us was the internet. What you have to have at least is the intuition to choose something that motivates you and makes you passionate about it, because there is no limits on that.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you today, Angel. So what is Kaspa?
Thank you for having me. Okay, Kaspa is a complete rabbit hole in itself. So imagine Kaspa is like Bitcoin with internet speed. Is a decentralized, fair launch, open source project, which launched as let's say it was launched as following the Bitcoin ethos, is an asset without an issuer. So what made Bitcoin great was there was no company behind, there was no entity behind, right? So people start mining Bitcoin and Bitcoin became relevant. And there is no one center of one entity that manage all, 90%, 10%, 20% of Bitcoin. So it's decentralized and is spread among society, let's say. And Kaspa as a project is an infrastructure carrier. So it's instead of a block DAG having one block after the other, Kaspa will be as a next generation technology, which has block confirmations in parallel. So it forms like a graph, a direct, a cyclic graph. And this makes possible to have confirmation, the same security of Bitcoin, but just on a much faster pace, if that makes sense. So it's basically internet speed Bitcoin, but you can also build programmability on top of Kaspa. So just to put the background on this. So if you look Bitcoin, the largest cryptocurrency, it was the first cryptocurrency and largest in size. And the use case was to make digital payments, right? That's, if you look at the Satoshi white paper, Bitcoin vision was to make a peer-to-peer payment system, which is not. It's a terrible payment system. So that's really sad in a way. And so it didn't fulfill the expectations for what Bitcoin was created, which it was peer-to-peer payments. You have systems that have been built on top of Bitcoin, like protocols, L2s or Lightning Network and all these solutions to make payments possible. But those are centralized servers, are protocols that they don't inherit the hash rate or the mining protection, the energy wall of protection that Bitcoin should present. Payment system is not a good payment system in itself, because if I send you a payment for a coffee, it will cost you more than the coffee and it will take more than 10 minutes to send and maybe a couple of hours or even days to confirm. And then you have Ethereum, which was made by Vitalik Buterin. And Ethereum made programmability possible. So they scale Bitcoin in the sense, okay, you don't have just cryptography and payments, but you have also programmability. You can build applications, decentralized systems, mirror finance, what is called decentralized finance, and so on. And they opened this new gate of possibilities. And interestingly enough, the Ethereum white paper, if you look at the Ethereum white paper, Vitalik, in order for him to build Ethereum more than 10 years ago, he took an open source protocol that was called Ghost. And this protocol was published by Dr. Jonathan Sempolinsky and Aviv Sohar. Dr. Jonathan Sempolinsky is the originator of Kaspa. So Kaspa is the works for more than a decade of one of the most renowned scholars on blockchain technology and cryptography, is one of the most cited scholars in Google Scholars as well. And Dr. Jonathan Sempolinsky, during this research, he came up with different protocols and solutions, and finally gave birth to Kaspa, what the new consensus of Kaspa is. And the new consensus of Kaspa was fairly launched. So it was launched to the public, to the world, as Bitcoin was launched, with no intermediaries, no pre-allocation, no pre-mining. Just for you to have an idea, Ethereum at the beginning was proof of work, as Bitcoin is, before changing to proof of stake. But when Ethereum launched, 40% of the circulation was pre-mined. Why this is relevant? Because then most of the crypto projects, like 95% of crypto projects, if you look at the allocation, which is like a pie chart and they call it tokenomics, you will see that there's a massive pre-allocation for marketing, like team, various VCs and people that basically bought earlier or got tokens for free and they just dump into the market. So that didn't happen with Bitcoin. Bitcoin just was mined organically until, with different sorts of equipment. So at the beginning, you have like PCUs, then GPUs, then FPGAs. Then when ASICs hit the market, like this designated hardware, right, the mining chips, the distribution of Bitcoin was around 58%, meaning all the Bitcoin in perpetuity will be mined by just ASICs, like big hardware, which is this mostly larger corporations mining Bitcoin now, and those will mine Bitcoin in perpetuity. Kaspa had a fair launch model, and they modified the algo, so it will be fair from day one. So if you have a bigger hardware, you couldn't just start mining from day one, from Genesis. So they came up with the ASIC-friendly algorithm because ASICs will come anyways to the market if you have a valuable project to mine this coin, right?
So what?
Yes.
What is the benefit of Kaspa compared to the other ones? Like you can use it for faster payments, is that right?
You can use it for faster payments. You can use it for programmability. Just today, Wednesday 25, I don't know when this will be published, but the L2 on Kaspa just came live. It's called Igra Labs. So Igra Labs brings programmability for the first time to a DAC, which is Kaspa. And you have the same capabilities that you could have on any virtual machine as Ethereum with lower fees, with the same security as Bitcoin, and with second confirmation. So Kaspa produces, instead of Bitcoin 1 block every 10 minutes, produces 10 blocks per second. So today is 6,000 times faster than Bitcoin with the same security primitives. And I got engaged into the Kaspa community because of my brother. Actually, I came up to realize about the project, and the most I was looking into it, the most I thought, okay, there's no way this is real. This is absolutely rubbish. There's no way whatsoever that something like this could be feasible. And it reminded me on the internet early days. I don't know. How old are you, Richard?
I'm 38 now. I don't know.
So yeah, we're same age.
Yeah.
I'm 39. So basically, you remember calling the internet with the cable, Ethernet cable, and all these rings and
the dial-up, right?
Yeah, and at the beginning, the search engines were like Yahoo and others, and no one saw Google coming. No one saw all this, massive companies that they were built, but they were built. The format was better. So I think Kaspa currency, more as a Kaspa infrastructure layer, is just powerhouse of innovation, and is open source, is fair launched. There is no company behind or team, controlling the network, and that was it. Made me think about, this is something of value, and I just started doing research about it. Now I'm coordinating some efforts to ideally open a vehicle to access digital assets on a regulated basis in the UAE, but that's we will submit this week for the in-principle approval, so it will take a couple of months yet, but it has to be fully compliant with, of course, regulation and so on, which is another stuff. And that's pretty much my background. My background is law, as you know. I end up in this tech rabbit hole out of somehow interest, but then it turned out something that blew my mind completely.
It's a massive change, isn't it? From some of because your career path seems really interesting. How you've gone from Ecuador to China studying law, now in Lithuania, and now really interested. But we can come on to more of that in the future. I just want to also ask a few questions about it, because this coin that you were mentioning, what is the actual, what are your thoughts about the faster versions of Bitcoin? Because then Bitcoin has is it called Bitcoin Lite? I forget the name.
Bitcoin had different forks during all this couple of years. You had people that just fork Bitcoin, copy Bitcoin, and then just increment the block size or try to push the throughput to make it faster. The result is going to be lack of security, because you have what is called the crypto trilemma, right? Which is, you have, from one side, you have security, you have fast transactions and scalability and decentralization. So basically, if a system is decentralized, completely decentralized, as Bitcoin is, and completely secure, technically, it cannot be scalable. So then you have, for example, Solana. So it's less decentralized, is more secure and more scalable, right? But it's not completely decentralized. Or systems like Hyperledger. So it's super, super secure, super fast, incredible technology, but is centralized in one entity, 25 nodes. Then Kaspa for the first time broke this solve, particularly this trilemma with the best trade-offs, because it made possible to push throughput with a different consensus mechanism. So instead of having a blockchain, one block after the other, you have this DAG, which produces 10 blocks per second. And you can just Google Kaspa Visualizer and you will see in live and production what Kaspa Visualizer looks like. And it's absolutely mind blowing. And I think that's the first way to understand how like a different layer of technology is. Apparently, when the internet was created, you had different layers of the internet that actually happened to be what the internet is now. So engines have become more sophisticated and so on. This is no exception. It's how technology works. In my perspective, this is something that has proprietary value proposition, as opposed to just forking a Bitcoin code and try to push for different block rates and so on.
So there's something fundamentally different, like a big advantage over this to previous versions, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a bit consensus, but basically extrapolates is in the sense that it's the same Nakamoto consensus, the same principles, but just the mechanics are different. So that's pretty much the situation. There are more nuances to this, but yes.
Yeah, sure. How do you see it developing in the future? Do you think it will kind of eat into some of the Bitcoin adoption? If there is for this, will it take a share away from that?
Okay, I mean, I have this, and this is not a particular theory. This is just me, tinfoil talking about things. It's nothing about I think that Kaspa could become one of the biggest rotations on crypto. Not necessarily Bitcoin or Ethereum will be relevant, but I think Kaspa is fundamentally superior. So markets will decide. I think that's one of the big situations here.
And so are you kind of investing in Kaspa compared to the other Bitcoins? And how do you see the price in terms of where to put assets in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Kaspa has 4 years since its launch. So obviously it's very difficult to draw a comparison. But if you look at growth, Kaspa grew to the first asset to win Bitcoin on the first $1 billion mark in the lower time possible, which was Bitcoin's record on any sorts of commodity or any asset overall, even compared to any other commodity in the world, was Bitcoin. So Bitcoin reached the first $1 billion in the lowest time frame possible, and the only cryptocurrency who beat that mark was Pepe, with this meme coin, right? But it was just he beat the mark of $1 billion and then fall off a cliff immediately, obviously for his reasons. But Kaspa has surpassed that that time frame. Now is imagine it came to be top 20 cryptocurrency by market capitalization during the bear market, and no one knows about it. And it's for lunch. That's kind of interesting. Now it's still holding up on the top 100 because, after October 10th last year, 2025, this trigger event that happened to clean up tons of liquidations in a very historical cascade of events. Yeah, apart from that, you can see that there is something of value, but that's another reasoning. Obviously, you have to look into it properly.
And do you see, what do you think of the current Bitcoin price? Do you think it will continue going up? Do you have any predictions?
Crypto has tons of volatility. On one side, you have regulation has been trying to be pushed for the last couple of years, and that actually is my PhD research about compliance on digital assets. So I've been looking at this very closely in various countries. But then, apart from those efforts try to replicate, what happened on traditional finance or in fintech, in the fintech industry, and you try to apply those same manuals or criteria to crypto. And crypto is a completely different animal. It's a completely different category, which has their own mechanisms, and they are situations in which just lack of reporting could exploit major events. So, for example, what happened when trying to explain what happened in October 10th and last year, more than $20 billion were just wiped out of the market just in less than a weekend. And then on the following days, you have this sense of fear of, okay, One is geopolitical situation is very strange. So people are going to hard assets. So now Bitcoin was supposed to be the digital gold. But if you want to be objective, Bitcoin did not play out as digital gold. Gold is trading above $5,000. Bitcoin is on his yearly low. So it's definitely not difficult, not digital gold. And there is a lot of speculations in terms of how people enter the market around the US presidential campaign. There is funds that they obviously enter with 40,000, 30,000, 60,000 Bitcoin, and Bitcoin reached 150,000. So obviously those folks are out of the market yet. Still. And then you have this narrative of the 4-year cycle. So the big test for the 4-year cycle, it was, okay, if Bitcoin goes up to 115,000 during this first quarter, okay, the fourth cycle is finished and you can see, lots of upside. But I think the situation of Bitcoin is not just accumulation of all these geopolitical problems that we have here and the current situations around the Epstein files in the US and geopolitical historical issues that now are somehow being framed. So I think the asset class will become relevant still, but there is a lot of things on the controlling and regulator side of things that have to be taken care of. And for example, one of those things is just the compliance reporting. I mean, you have tons of companies that they are issuing assets and they are leveraging themselves. And there is lots of things that are public and loans that are on the private side of things. So you say, okay, now cryptocurrencies, everything is transparent about cryptocurrencies. And the reports that, some exchanges present to regulators are just a snapshot of reserves once a month or once every quarter. And that's it. So it's very static. But then whatever they do in their inside infrastructure, which is kind of like a iron curtain, and then whatever they do on the private, like on the private loan kind of things, could actually impact their balance sheets. So the moment any of those folks have some sort of issue, the whole market gets triggered. And that's the very hard thing of putting the proper controls to avoid the situation. And that's why I believe that the only system that is possible to be implemented in that end is live data reporting. Like you should have as an oxygen tank, you should have awareness of how much is left. So for example, if there's an institution issuing, just say, let's put the case of Circle. Let's say they issue USDC and you want to see that if there's backed 1-to-1, you should know what's behind those backings. I mean, obviously it's like short treasury bills and but in some jurisdictions, you don't know what it is. They just report every quarter, every once in a month now, in some other jurisdictions. But live what could happen if that's not the case. And I think that's the biggest risk. Systemic risk is a problem. So I think as an asset class, if this uncertainty happens to be resolved, also new capital will come in a better format, because cryptocurrency is not just Bitcoin and Ethereum and speculating into a price to go up. Is about how that technology design from infrastructure perspective could make markets more efficient. So you see, for example, the likes of ISDA now, they have what is called the CDM, like the common domain model. So this ISDA, the International Securities and Derivatives Association, have more than 40 years of standing, and those folks are standardizing financial instruments and swaps and OTC market for over decades. And they want to establish standards. They're exploring pilots on tokenization, for example, but just as an infrastructure or make things on a better format. So for example, you have to post collateral. I don't have to liquidate a position and then, go to the bank and lose time and money doing this. I could just do this instantaneously or settle or net in some obligations or contractual disputes instantaneously in a better format. And that's where the future on cryptocurrency and tokenization will go, on a more compliant manner. But that has to be fully regulated, and it has to be not just the speculation around, I want a coin to go up and there's like this pumps and dump market, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about pure infrastructure and try to, build up systems that last. And for compliance, I believe that real-time data, real-time decentralization is the only key, is the only way to track and trace not just liquidity, but any change of collateral that could trigger events and damage to the market and prevent that damage to happen. And if that happens even on a second basis or on a weekend, you have a regulator that can impose a fine to some company for that lack of compliance. So yeah, I mean, this is just what I have been looking for the last couple of years on my PhD now and on this digital asset compliance.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's fascinating. And does it vary much? Because there's so many different jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions are less, maybe they don't need to have that transparency compared to other ones. Do you see that there's going to be, how do you see that playing out? Do you think there's going to be a standardization of it? Or do you think that maybe the market will reward certain jurisdictions? How do you see that?
That is precisely the most important aspects of this, and is not everyone is looking this with the same lens. And that could be a good thing in some countries. Could be just an opportunity to get capital in, but also it could be really bad in the sense that there is no standardization. As of today, there is a lack of consistency or standardization in the digital asset space. So different countries and blocks have done some sort of approach for regulating crypto, but there is the lack of technical implementation and tooling that could make this as it should be in the future. I mean, things will line up eventually. People will catch up with this and needs, and that will happen anyways. But for now, you have even in Europe. I mean, you have the MiCA regulation. Europe trying to come up as a block with certain provisions. But if you look at the European Union MiCA regulation, even for stablecoins, you have quarterly reportings, which is something that is, bring out of the Stone Age. In crypto, quarterly reportings is a lifetime. So if someone has to present quarterly reports on the reserves and they can't do anything unlawful, they might do it anyways because they won't get caught and they just have to present, reports every quarter. And the UAE is pushing for monthly reports on stablecoins. At least the IFC new rules coming up in January, which is kind of interesting. And those are the things we need. I mean, we need regulators that are open to understand this new technology, but also they are willing to protect the public, and not just by means of, you have some small countries in Europe now licensing for virtual asset service providers on a European level because they want to catch the market, they want to catch the companies, the market share that implies for the countries, and they don't understand if they fail, the financial impact that could have is just unprecedented. So it's hundreds of billions of damage could be done.
Yeah. So do you think it could work as like live data? So they just publish it somewhere, or they connect with an API to something
exactly.
like that?
That's how the future should look like. So you should be able to, either the regulator should have access to that information. And now in cryptocurrency, there are systems that you don't have to disclose certain information. So for example, I don't have to disclose my trades because that could be proprietary information. I can use zero knowledge proof for that, which is this CK code to say, okay, I can publish certain information to be compliant or not, but I don't have to disclose, my whole investment strategy or so on and so forth. And there are mechanisms to this. I think the next 10 years, this will be the standard, like live data reporting. And what I was interested about Kaspa, for example, in a sense, is like the only system that you have proof of work, the centralized ledger that is permissionless, that could have a sub-second confirmation basis is something like Kaspa. But that's just my way of looking at things. And maybe just one use case of, 60 potential industrial use cases that you could find in Kaspa.
And how do you see that? Because there are so many different jurisdictions. Do you see the smaller jurisdictions having some kind of advantage over other ones? Maybe they don't need to have, they're more incentivized to attract capital, attract people. Like, how do you see the different jurisdictions developing? Which do you think will be the best jurisdictions in the future?
Yeah, again, I mean, for you to have certain global, that's a big question on crypto, right? So you usually have multiple jurisdictions, multiple markets, and there are companies that are serving different markets, and they have different standards for different markets. For example, if you look at US exchanges, certain US exchanges in the US might be different from, the global market that is being served with, a Cyprus company or some company in some jurisdiction like that. So those are the things that you have to look into. As a country, yes, it's an opportunity to catch the interest of international corporations going to, to develop services in your region. But also you have to be cautious because this could come with a very high price, a very high mark. And that is not just market damage of your name or reputation. It could be much worse than that. So it could be actual damage to retail or some sort of financial distress. due to some cascade of events.
Yeah, cool. So can you tell me a bit about the current work you're doing at the moment?
Oh yeah, okay. So I'm coordinating some efforts now to open a 3C license fund manager in the UAE. I cannot disclose more in detail, sadly, until I get this in principle approval. But we will be submitting the formal application this week. It will take 30 to 45 days to get this in principle approval, and then we'll try our best to incorporate the vehicle in the couple of months before May or so to have our fund set up for digital asset strategy. So it's like a long-term initiative. It's like 3 to 5 year initiative as a qualified investment fund, like a closed fund, not to buy and sell cryptos. Is just invest in Kaspa as a carrier, as an asset, and try to build infrastructure solutions around that. That's one part of my work. I do consulting as well on compliance and investment and cross-border payments. I did for more than 15 years traditional energy infrastructure, oil and gas, mostly mining and oil infrastructure deals between Latin America and Asia, most for Chinese state-owned companies. That's why I studied in China, and my China trip started in a way. There's one-way ticket to China.
Your China experience, your China journey.
Oh yes.
So yeah, how was the work you were helping them to do cross-border projects in Latin America and other countries?
Yeah, initially mostly Ecuador, because obviously I'm Ecuadorian. But I advised to a number of global Fortune 500 Chinese companies to do business abroad. With this, in my country, for example, as in most Latin American jurisdictions, China work with either preferential lines of credit or some debt agreements, which will finally feed local procurement procedures. So what is cool about the relationship with China, and me as the lawyer anyways, is like in Ecuador, if you want to establish your own business and you want to look at certain deals or certain sector, you will turn up 40, 50, 60, and maybe something will go, on your desk and so on. Working closely with Chinese companies gave me the opportunity to have access to energy markets, energy trading, bunkering, like all these very niche, specialized services, and somehow support Chinese on the market access on this front. Also technology, and that was also part of it. But yeah, that was my work and also doing the market access compliance and investment guidelines for those sorts of companies.
Yeah. So how was your journey? So you studied in law in China, and what was your pathway after that? How did you come to Lithuania?
Oh yes, I did my master's degree in China University of Political Science and Law and CUPL. It was in comparative law, Chinese and foreign comparative law. I went to China and lived there for 3 years. The first year was fully Chinese, and then I studied the degree in English. I came to the realization that it was very hard for me to study in Chinese, that degree. Like the law degree has a lot of weight on the language. So if you do 2 years of Chinese, maybe you're good to go. But otherwise, it is quite challenging. But I think I took the right decision. And by the time I was in China the first year, I had to struggle a lot because I had to study first the Chinese language, then I had to study English because that was the first time I had proper classes on English, and it was quite intense. Then I came back to my country, keep working with Chinese companies. I went back and forth. Then I started my doctoral degree in UIB, University of International Business Economics, and the major is international law. So I took the first semester, I killed myself. I think I took 80% of the courses or something like that. I was like absolutely crazy about the courses and do as much workload as I can because I wanted to focus more on the research. And that luckily enough happened because when I went for Christmas to Ecuador to visit my parents just for Christmas, COVID came in. So basically that was like a year off, which I took the rest of the courses online, and I started working with my supervisor on okay, what's going to be the topic of your research? And I said, I would like to write about digital assets. And in most countries, okay, digital assets was not a thing back in 2020 at all. Any supervisor in any other traditional university will tell you, okay, there's no much substance about this. What are you what your views confront with, state of the art. There is no enough state of the art things and so on. It will be quite challenging. I mean, it's nothing that will be impossible. It will be quite challenging. And even though in China, for example, cryptocurrency is not accepted as accepted to Hong Kong, which is, there's some pilots around cryptocurrency, and that doesn't mean that China doesn't have their eyes on the market. I mean, if you look at the
digital
research,
renminbi, right?
oh my God, yes, but not just the CBDCs, but mostly, and I will say the research aspect of blockchain technology on Chinese universities. Zhejiang University and all, like they're constantly publishing peer review index papers on the matter. They're quite advanced and they're quite sophisticated. Even initially back in 2008, 2010, so the international conference where Bitcoin conference, there was a lot of Bitcoin conference in Beijing.
I remember some of those.
Yeah. I met during my COPL days. I met a Latvian lawyer. She's now head of compliance at Bitcoin Swiss, and she's studying in China and back in the day. So yeah,
there used to be a lot of crypto events in Beijing, right? In China,
yeah.
And then I think there's a lot of leading companies that came from China and then they went to other countries.
Oh yes,
and then it just stopped. No more.
But yeah, I mean, one thing is, okay, the government views on certain topic, but the research universities have some sort of freedom. What I'm trying to say is like, I had the opportunity that my professor gave me the chance to write something that I wanted, and we did our best to get and put together something that now that I just defended my pre-defense 2 months ago. I finished my full paper and I'm presenting the final defense a month from now to get my degree in May. That was just unthinkable. All this very incredible turns on legislation will happen. At least if you look at what happened in the US just in the last administration, is massive how things are standardized in the US, and they have been doing for a while in Europe, and you see the likes of Singapore and the UAE, which are the 4 main jurisdictions I took, which are making a fascinating work around it.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you see? Are you using AI much in your work at the moment? And also, I'm curious to see how do you think AI might? Are you using AI much in your work as in compliance or in your general work?
I'm best to be super open about technology overall, and I think I've been like this my whole life. Even though I'm not a technical person, no, I have some notions on coding on the logic side of things. I don't code any particular languages. I tried my best to follow up on things on that sort. I started playing around like vibe coding with Claude a couple of months ago. And what happened to be the case now is just mind blowing. I mean, you could orchestrate these agents with the API and try to come up with different things, pulling out data from one side, put it regulator requirements for others. You can build automated manuals in a window that pretty much will take you months even. So yeah, I mean, it is super interesting what's happening around not just Anthropic, also this OpenClaw, but apart from the market distress or what people might think, human interaction is fundamental. I think what happened to me, at least what I learned from China, is I speak a decent Chinese. I will say intermediate, a little bit more than intermediate. Is not perfect, but I can. Yeah, 我说话的说很小. The thing is, yeah, you could communicate in different languages, which is kind of cool. But obviously, when you talk to someone in your native language, everything changed, and that's why encouraged me to study Chinese at least. Then understand the culture around it. I mean, in China, you have all these interactions with Chinese friends, and you learn how to behave, or you have these different cultural settings that helps you to do different things, and you understand, business etiquette, dining etiquette, things like you present yourself, you show up, you go to different places, you open your network of people, and somehow this has an impact on your life. I mean, the reason why I ended up living in Latvia at the beginning was because there was a Latvian person I was talking with in WeChat about potential tech hubs in the European Union. He suggested Latvia. Because of a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, I ended up having what they are now my Latvian friends. So there are these China expats who lived in Beijing and so on. So we gathered together to have hot pods, and they introduced me the university that I did some project on research before and things like this. So yeah, fundamentally, human interactions are super important. Now, even around the Kaspa ecosystem, I met people from the Desert Energy network of people that are super valuable with tremendous ethics, and when you show up, you go around and you put yourself out of the comfort zone. That opens up possibilities, and I guess that's the message for most. I don't know what's the age range of your audience, Richard, but for example, not being afraid to make big changes. I think is a big part of it. First time I went to China, I put my life into suitcases and I said, okay, no idea what will happen. I was super broke. I was like so broke. Oh my God, it was so painful. The master's degree. But yeah, it taught me a lot. I mean, it opened the options to go to Germany, to the Max Planck Institute while studying in Beijing. And that would never happen to me coming from South America. I had the head of the institute. He was my direct supervisor during that research short-term stay in Germany. And even now, back in my PhD, when I went back to Freiburg to use the library, I was received as a guest, not as a common person in common schedules, but I was even given a key because you stay here, you were a researcher of us, and so on. And that's I think that's the best thing. So you have this thing of technology going crazy in a way, but then human interactions and networking and taking the chances, opportunities. I think that's fundamental. Because
that's it's really key to have there's lots of people here kind of concerned, how is it going to impact jobs and how is it going to impact people's careers? And how would you, from where you're seeing, do you have any insights or ideas about how people should prepare if they're starting a career now? What kind of opportunities do you see that are AI proof?
I love this quote. Is really funny, but maybe it is funny in itself. There is this guy who is called Sergey Nazarov, is the person behind Chainlink, the co-founder of Chainlink, which is a blockchain project, one of the top 15 infrastructure projects. And he said once in a podcast, if he wants to send a message to the youth, he will say, okay, if you're really smart, you're going to make it anyways. If you're not, you're screwed anyways. And the thing is just a joke to say, okay, it doesn't matter. I mean, we have various things that could happen in life. You have to be open to the sense, okay, you'll have lots of technology. For us was the internet, and for next generations will be other sorts of layers. But somehow what you have to have at least is the intuition to choose something that motivates you and makes you passionate about it. Because there is no limits on that. And why is the reason? Okay, you can maybe you are an incredible coder. Now you have all these clouds and payments for developers might go to zero. We never know. Or maybe developers will be more doing agency work on a orchestration stage or more niche kind of jobs. We'll never know. Maybe people have to repurpose in certain areas to do something else. But having this open mind and say, okay, I have to be adventurous enough to choose something that might give you, the freedom to move from different areas, or just to understand that in some point in time, you have to transition to one very hard area to transition from to something different. In my case was, for example, law. If you come from Ecuador and you study law in South America, that absolutely ties you with your home country and your local practice. Because very few people will give up their bar practice in their home country because they took them 6 stages to get there. Some people might say, okay, no, you have those skills, and here you have something that you can just repurpose and do something else. So I think that's the beauty of any change or just how you can move from one area to another. But it is about passion, I guess. That's my way of looking at things.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And also something that I'm seeing is that you often need to stop something that's working in order to do something that will work in the future better, right? So there's some kind of pain and there's some kind of also confidence in saying, no, this isn't the right path. I'm going to choose another one that's not certain yet, but there's something about that is worth following. And there's also something powerful in following your passion as a kind of guide, isn't it? because or your interest or your purpose in terms of it gives you some extra drive rather than just kind of the logical pathway of what to do. There's something powerful in following a purpose that has some higher meaning. Maybe that becomes more and more important. Some interesting ideas.
I mean, for me, is an asymmetric bet always.
Yeah.
Bet on you. That's for the upside. But then also, I mean, there are things that are happening, and you have to be brave enough to go out of your comfortable zone. Instead of watching Netflix, look at those free courses from Anthropic, and maybe just to have an idea, just as an example. But then, yeah, it depends. What are your views? I mean, people like other things are things that eventually will never be or will very unlikely be taken by AI anytime soon. But again, those are different situations for different people, obviously.
Yeah. There's I think going to be a lot of change, and there's a new everyone is going to have to need to kind of switch. But there's also an advantage in having multiple jurisdictions and also multiple. Say if you know China, you know Lithuania, you know Ecuador. So it gives you a huge advantage, right? Because you can then choose, or you can like coordinate between them. And then you also are multi-disciplined. So you know law, you know finance and crypto. So you can, at the intersection of those, so you have, I think that's a trend that gives people a huge advantage in the future, is having these kind of these frameworks, or like having these multi-jurisdiction and multi-subjects. Having that is a huge advantage. So yeah. What would you say? Yeah, is there anything else you would like to discuss that we haven't discussed?
I want to ask you, what's your biggest market? I mean, without disclosing more proprietary data, but where most of applicants come from? What are the top of their concerns usually? What that you have come across?
Yes. So for studying in China or just in general,
Correct.
yeah, it's really diverse. We actually have a lot from the US, even though there aren't as many. I mean, like the biggest countries for studying in China is Thailand, Vietnam, and there's like a bunch of Asian countries. But we are kind of more English speaking countries, more independent students who are searching to apply to university. I think, yeah, usually like English speaking countries, and then it's just extremely diverse. Like there's just students from every country, and it tends to be the students that are more independent and likely to search online. So they seem to be very high quality of students.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I was wondering, yeah, and usually age range, is that something that comes very often as a question
for studying in China, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the age is usually like the majority is bachelor's, and then there's some for masters. So yeah, most students who study abroad they do it for bachelor's, but then probably another percentage for masters, and then some for learning Chinese.
Yeah, because I mean, my only message from the top of my head will be like, I went to China when I was around, I don't know, 27 or so. So for me, was doing my master's degree at that age was a little bit late comparing to my peers, or comparing to other colleagues, and the PhD also because I waited a number of years to go back. And then yeah, I mean, I guess the message will be, if they're staying this long to listen to us, will be, yeah, I mean, don't be afraid. I mean, there's a point that you can catch up, or even if your grades are not good enough, I mean, eventually you can just by consoling you can get there, I guess. And that's with the proper direction. For me, you guys on my doctoral degree, that was really huge. Thanks, and huge shout out to China Admissions for that, because it made my process very, very, very clear very quickly. It was very hard to do on my own. I wouldn't have managed maybe. So that was something that it was of high value. And very happy to see where your work leads you as well. And yeah, lovely to connect, and thank you for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for that, Encho. It's good to chat.
Super.